You are listening to From Sobriety to Recovery with Jesse Mogul. Let's get to the show. Welcome back to From Sobriety to Recovery. I am your host, Jesse Mogul. I am in addiction recovery. Splendid to be back. I know I missed a week last week, and part of my brain has rationalized that the closer I'm getting to 300, the more I need to have figured out for the launch of the YouTube side of this. And since last week was so chaotic, I was like, maybe I don't do an episode. And that gets to elongate my timetable on getting the YouTube launched, which did sort of think that might be a reason. And either way, I've got both different cameras and the microphones, and I will be testing those out over the next few days to make sure that everything is all systems go on this. And once that goes and is ready for launch, then I'll start making sure that all those links are located within the show notes, as well as I'm going to start launching some TikTok videos. I've chosen that as my main source, even though I think I've got like 10,000 people over on the Instagram side of it. I just am more attuned with TikTok and using that than I have been on Instagram. And I just don't have the bandwidth to do things on both sides. So while I might touch upon Instagram, that really will be to elicit people's actions over to TikTok, where I'll be doing a majority of the videos and things of that nature that will help promote what it is I'm doing over on YouTube. So that's enough of the admin side. Today is going to be a fun little episode. And I do have a concert that's going on in a couple hours. I got to make my way down to Birmingham to see Train and REO Speedwagon, and I'm super excited for this show. Last year we saw Train here in Huntsville, and it was such an exciting experience that we've chosen to go back to see them again. We're a little bit disappointed that we didn't choose to see them in Franklin, because we liked that amphitheater better, but we had never really been to either. And it wasn't until we had been to both that we realized that we very much more enjoy the one in Franklin over the one in Birmingham. But the tickets were already purchased, and so alas, off we go to see them tonight. And part of my decision-making process on like how I'm going to figure out topics for episodes isn't necessarily always thought out far in advance. Sometimes things come across my eyeballs, my desk, that just elicit like, this would be a really great episode. So what we're going to talk about today is the concept of sobriety as punishment. And we're going to go on a lot of different aspects of this, and we're going to discuss the cycle of change, pre-contemplation, contemplation, planning, action, and then maintenance or relapse. It can also be termed as, because that's going to obviously come up once we start to get a little bit more into this. And I won't try to make this too long, because I really have set a deadline to be done and have this episode posted within the next 50 minutes so I can begin to prepare to leave the house an hour after that. So let's jump right in, because this is an extremely cool topic that was brought up in the tribe. So for those of you who have not noticed that I talk about the tribe a lot, the tribe is a group of listeners just like you who've all decided to join my online community that I now do through Slack. And there's lots of different rooms in here. I mean, I'm looking, we've got sobriety and recovery, relapse, music, health and physical fitness, emotions, mental learning, spirituality, religious and faith, podcast topics, randomness and memes, and then recovery and addiction resources, career, sports. So we even have a little thing for suggestions. We got one room called venting, where you can just scream into the wind if you like. And maybe people will respond with cool things, or maybe they'll just scream into the wind with you. But either way, one of the members who has been long-standing, she lives up in Grand Rapids. She was like one of the very first, don't think she was number one, but I definitely think she's in that top three, although I can't necessarily always remember that far. But to say that she is one of the founding members would absolutely be a true statement. And so she comes into the Slack room and she posts this question about, do you see sobriety as a punishment or an opportunity? And she had been taking a walk with one of her cousins when this question was posed during their walk, because addiction does run pretty deeply in this family, as I believe that it probably does for a lot of us, that we're going to find that addiction is scoured throughout our family tree. And when this question was posed by this cousin, it's because on his side, it's very excessive drinking of the way that she describes it in this message that she posts. And so she brought that question over to us. Do you see sobriety as a punishment, or do you see sobriety as an opportunity? Well, it took me some time to be able to get back to this, but when I did, I'm just going to go ahead and read you guys what I wrote, because even as I was writing it, I was like, this would be a great topic for the podcast. And then I thought, well, how could I summarize it? And then I was like, well, it's already pretty much summarized. Maybe I should just read it. So when posed with the question of, do I see sobriety as a punishment or an opportunity? This was my response over in the Wise Mind Empowerment Tribe, which, if, by the way, if it's something that you would like to join, there are opportunities on the website. You need only go to jessymogul.com, go up to the link there in the main menu bar that is available so that you would be able to access it if you would like. It's certainly shown great benefits for many people who are actively involved in it. It's called Tribe Membership. It's right next to the word home. So pretty simple for you to be able to get yourself into if that's something that you would like. And maybe after this episode, you'll be very much enjoying the opportunity to come be involved with us. So again, after all that, the question is sobriety a punishment or an opportunity? And this is how I responded. Okay. I can relate to the punishment aspect when framed around the beginning stages of the recovery process. I certainly was about to die and my body was failing. Y'all know about the shit tub, so clearly I needed to make a change. Yes, I did enter into this with a whole lot of excitement, and I can also vividly recall that I had fucked myself up so badly that, at the minimum, I was looking at a 14 to 21 day detox just to get back to relative, quotes, normal. Now, that did turn out to be about 6 weeks before the night sweats and the shaking stopped and my heart stopped feeling like a needle was piercing it when I breathed heavily, so there was that. I can understand why someone would think and feel that sobriety is a punishment if they have been living in that cloud for so long. Like, fuck, man. Of course, it seems like a punishment if you haven't gone a few days without booze or drugs in years and everything you do or did was tied to alcohol and drug consumption. Think about the first time bowling, skating, walking the beach, an orgasm, going to a social function. Any gathering of adults that fucking exists in this country, there is booze there for sure. And in states where weed is legal, that shit's there too. So would it feel scary to not have that crutch, that best bud there to alleviate stress or anxiety or to heighten the experience? Well, fuck yeah. I can see why people would feel that way. Now let's move forward with some time under our belt. We have experienced life and all of its ups and downs and shit days and chaos, and we have made it through all those fucking, if this were a drinking day, I'd be drunk moments. And we are sober. Fucking sober. Now, on the other side of all that, yeah, it would feel like the highest victory ever. Like, fuck you, Mount Everest. I made it through Thanksgiving with the family without knocking down a pint of Jose before most of these peeps even drank a cup of coffee. So I can rattle on for an hour on this, and to wrap it up, yes, at the beginning, people probably do experience sobriety as a punishment for drinking. Like, way to fucking go, Jesse. Now you can't drink ever again. But all that dissolves over time. And now, while, yes, I see people at concerts having beers and laughing, and I can ask myself, man, wouldn't that be great? Then I see them leave during great songs to get another, spend $100 chasing a dragon that can't be tamed, even if they get it within arm's reach. And I know without a doubt that that first drink on that first day isn't my biggest concern. It's day 117 on the spirits when I think I got this all figured out. And then I black out, I wake up, and it's 12 days later, and my life is a post-apocalyptic nightmare, and it's all my own doing. Fuck that shit. Sobriety is a blessing and a gift that keeps on giving. And like an awesome cake, you gotta wait for it to bake to the deliciousness. It doesn't happen in minutes, days, weeks, or months. While the aroma of awesomeness begins to fill our lives once the initial shock to the mind and body dissipates and healing starts, the real amazing is waiting for us with a never-ending supply of cream cheese frosting. And it might take years to get to that point, and using for sure will only continue the cycle we are already sick and tired of. So I'd rather start the journey today. Plant that tree. Put that cake in the oven. Knowing the shade won't exist for 20 years and the cake won't be done until some random ass time that I can speculate upon but never put in the books. The punishment is in continuing something that is going to kill us and living a life that never even whispers us toward our ultimate fulfillment and potential. And then I close with, so that's all I got to say about that, with a Forrest Gump kind of voice in my head. For now, anyone else care to return serve? One of our other members immediately follows it up with a summary. Jesse reflects on their journey of recovery from addiction, acknowledging the initial perception of sobriety as a form of punishment. At the beginning, the process was incredibly difficult, involving severe physical and mental withdrawal symptoms that lasted for weeks. Jesse emphasizes with those who feel that sobriety is daunting, especially when everything in life, from social events to stress relief, seems tied to substance use. However, as time passed, he began to see sobriety not as a punishment, but as a triumph and a profound victory. Overcoming the challenges of staying sober in situations that used to trigger drinking feels like conquering a significant obstacle akin to climbing Mount Everest. The writer emphasizes that the real danger in recovery is complacency, as it's easy to relapse after a period of sobriety, leading to disastrous consequences. Ultimately, Jesse views sobriety as a blessing, a journey that, while slow and challenging, leads to a life filled with fulfillment and potential. He compares it to baking a cake or planting a tree, rewards that require time and patience but are worth the effort. Continuing to use substances is seen as the real punishment, as it prevents one from reaching their true potential and leads to self-destruction. I even put in here, and now we have today's podcast. And this is the member of the tribe who lives in St. Augustine. If you guys remember, he used to live up in the Boston, Rhode Island, northeastern area. Now it's been so long since he's been up there, I don't even remember where it was located, but I definitely know he lives in St. Augustine now. And so the questions posed by Grand Rapids, I go off and I come up with this answer, really just conscious stream of thought. I had been meaning to get to it, and when I finally did, I just said, what are your thoughts on this? And then St. Augustine summarized it. And I know I've spent like 7 minutes reading off of our Slack channel about this, but I think for a lot of us, why I wanted to do this episode today was that we can experience sobriety and recovery as a punishment, because we don't get to live that normal life anymore. We don't get to be the person who gets to go to the bar and order a pint and just enjoy it with our friends while we play some pool or watch some sports or just mingle with our ladies at brunch on a Sunday afternoon. That now we're the ones sitting over there just drinking the soda water or the OJ or whatever your beverage of choice is that's not going to get you inebriated. I can understand why this thought process would exist in our society and in many cultures. In fact, you need look no further than the United Kingdom, where the English, the Scottish, and the Irish are very much known for their heavy drinking, especially whenever it's around their sporting events. Europe is very much known for their heavy drinking in many of those cultures. I'm not so sure about how African cultures, and again, there's like 30, 40 countries in the continent of Africa. So when you start trying to figure out how the African culture would potentially view and experience addiction, I'm not quite as familiar with that. Although I have had clients in South Africa, and it's very much prevalent there. Australians are also known for their heavy drinking, as well as the Asian community. I currently have a client who lived in China for many years, and it was a very hard partying society. Same with Japan. They're very much known for their heavy drinking because they work themselves to the bone there. And oddly enough, Tennessee whiskey is something that has been very popular in Japan for many years now. Not so familiar with how South Korea treats drinking, but I do know that they work themselves to the bone there as well. And I think we're pretty familiar with Russian vodkas and how their culture has utilized alcohol dependency over the course of centuries. So we can see where alcohol has permeated every single aspect of societies throughout. And I don't want to leave South America out of the equation, but again, I don't know as much about their drinking relationship, nor do I know much about their drug relationship, although we do very much equate Central America and South America and the Caribbean islands with marijuana production, cocaine production. Certainly, we think about Afghanistan, we think about the opioid production, the opiates that come there from the poppy plant. So the whole world really has combined to create this addiction world that we live in. And we could get philosophical and ask ourselves, is this just part of the machine, trying to keep us numb so we don't realize that the entire planet's turning into an authoritarian government police state with cameras everywhere? That's a whole other episode. We don't need to get into that right now. Regardless of whether there are people doing nefarious things for nefarious reasons, when I think my brain wants to go back to the Egyptian times, when it was the first time that we learned how to ferment fruits in order to create an inebriating substance. And I did research one time about how back when we were like Neanderthals and things of that nature, that there was a lot more oxygen on the planet, and that as the oxygen began to dissipate, it used to be a lot more oxygen. That's why dinosaurs could exist and trees were 1,000 feet tall. There was just a lot more oxygen in the air. I didn't know that either till I came across that research. Anyways, digressing from that, as we began to do a lot of that hunting and gathering, we would locate fruits on the forest floor. And that part of the reasons that humans ultimately evolved the way they did was that the ones who could still maintain some sense of focus and normalcy, even after having eaten these fermented fruits off the forest floor, which would bring some level of intoxication to them, and they would still be able to fight off saber-toothed cats and woolly mammoths and things of that nature. The ones who could not be as immune to the effects of this inebriating substance, again, very early stages of alcohol, were the ones who would ultimately get eaten by the saber-toothed cats. So the humans evolved really in a way where those who were not as susceptible, or were at least able to fend off gigantic beasts while they were intoxicated, or not step on snakes. I mean, think about how big creatures used to be back then. For dinosaurs to have existed, that's a pretty freaking large-ass creature. That's a lot of oxygen. So insects were bigger too, mind you. This wasn't just the mammals and the reptiles. This was everything was bigger. So not to get stuck on the evolutionary chain of how we became such an addictive species, but it doesn't take too much to begin to create this story of like, okay, well, at early stages, fermentation, the Egyptians found out a way to ferment. Then they used this intoxicating substance as a gift to the slaves or the workers who would go out there and take care of the rulers' deeds and needs. And so just over the course of time, like being able to use mead and things of that nature became very prominent within all societies. In fact, the Pilgrims were very much known for their desires to be intoxicated. Even though the beer, the mead, whatever they wanted to call it, had a lot lower alcohol content than our current beer does, mostly the need for that was that organisms and bacteria could grow in water, but they can't grow in fermented beverages. So by having a fermented beer, even again at a very low percent, though drank in enough quantity would still get them inebriated. This is one of the reasons why, the Pilgrims were intoxicated all the way across. I mean, we're talking Mayflower shit here, guys. And another reason why they got dropped off at Plymouth Rock was because the boat that they were on needed to get its ass back to England, and they were afraid they were going to get drank out of all their beer, which was their number one source of hydration. So hope you enjoyed that little historical time capsule there. And now let's get us back here into the present. So we have now created a worldwide culture where intoxication for the most part, is a normal thing. Even with some of the religions, like Islam does not favor any kind of drinking of alcohol. And in many of the countries that you might be familiar with, the Dubais, the Qatars, the Bahrains, those literally will only let expatriates, which are people from the Western civilizations, or people from Asia. Basically, as long as you're not a citizen of that country and a devout follower of Islam, then you can drink, but you can only do it in certain establishments like westernized hotels and bars and nightclubs that are specifically for the tourism industry. But if you're a local and you consider yourself a citizen of one of these Middle Eastern countries, you are not supposed to be imbibing alcohol. Although money is definitely a way out of that kind of decision-making process. So if you're extremely poor, you're probably frowned upon in your drinking and probably get punished severely if you get caught, versus if you have a lot of money and live in a nice penthouse and you have the ability to sway influence should anybody try to bust your chops about drinking and you being a native to, let's say, Dubai. So we have this entire worldwide culture that does focus on alcohol use or abstinence, trying to keep people away from it. And again, religion, Christianity, Catholicism, they've got their own thoughts about this, even though drinking is very prevalent in countries that have been historically known for Christianity and Catholicism. So now here we are, 2024, and we're being asked, is sobriety a punishment? And based off of what I've just rattled you through and what I posted, I can understand why it would be perceived that way when you have the entire scope of human history in some shape or another favoring being intoxicated, whether this is off of a fermented fruit or vegetable, or now the more modern times where we have all these different ways, barley and hops and wheat and yeast can turn beer. And so the punishment aspect really is more of a subjective to your perspective and a judgment call on yours. Because as somebody who initially got into this, as I outlined in the post that I made on our Slack channel, my beginning stages, I had put myself in such a deep hole that I knew I was looking at least a 2 to 3 week detox just to try to get the night sweats and the shakes to go away. And it did take about 6 weeks for the sharp piercing pain in my heart to go away. And then still for another few months, my body still wasn't right. And again, I broke my leg skydiving on August 13th of 2016. And roughly 6 months later, almost to the day, and maybe to the day, January 13th of 2017 is whenever I sobered up. It was 6 months of hardcore drinking. So I had a lot of reversal with my body and a lot of healing to do. And so for me, it wasn't a punishment, because the punishment was really in the detoxing. The punishment was what I had done to myself. And by the time my body got righted, which I do recall being roughly about 60 to 90 days later, that's when I was introduced to NLP. That's when I spent all that money to go down to Florida to learn different ways of thinking and feeling and experiencing my life. And when I came back up, I was rejuvenated, wanted to learn more neuro-linguistic programming. And that led me to finding Matt Bronning, which led me to learning NLP, then teaching NLP, and now I run a whole business with that as the foundation of what I speak upon. But yet, 100 books and 5,000 other people's podcasts and 300 of my own later, there's certainly so much more information that I've brought into the mix that I now utilize this microphone to bring to you. And so whether you choose to experience your sobriety as punishment or not really is in the way you decide to frame it. If you think that going to public outings, sitting at home and being intoxicated on a normal random ass day is the way you want to live your life, and even with the flames all around you, you're like, it's fine. Makes me think of that meme where the dog's drinking the coffee, there's fire all around him, and the caption says everything is fine. That's really, for those of us who got so deep into the addiction, that was the life that we were living in. For my girlfriend who likes the occasional 2 beers a night, or her friends who can go out and have a mimosa and call it a day, that was never my life. To me, it's like 2 beers. I'm not even going to start if that's all I can get. 2 beers was what I drank in the shower. 2 beers is what I had before I even put my feet on the floor in the morning if I woke up with a bad enough hangover. So is it punishment? it's really your decision to make. And at those beginning stages, I can absolutely understand why you would think it that way. You're going to have to be the person who doesn't drink at social functions. You're going to be the one who doesn't get to hide from the pain and suffering that you have been clearly muting yourself from for years. It's like having been married to something for years and years and years, then all of a sudden it's just like, nope, sorry, we can't be friends. I don't even want any contact with you. Yet in many places you look, other people are still dating your ex and hanging out with them at all times. And you can't go to a restaurant without there being an entire area of that restaurant just dedicated to a ton of different bottles that can be turned into thousands of different drinks. And here you are just wanting to break bread with your family and not necessarily be exposed to this ex of yours that destroyed your life, yet other people seemingly can have a good time with. It's, again, some of us have had the bell rung and some of us have not had the bell rung. But once you squeeze that toothpaste and you get it out of the tube, you're not putting it back in. And if you want to experience it as a punishment, again, that might be normalized thinking in our society at the beginning stages. And it really does take that time and effort. Now, NLP teaches us that we can make changes in an instant, but you don't get to solidify. I'm not going to say ever, but let me just reel that word in because you know how I feel about universal quantifiers. You can make a change in an instant. I can set up a bunch of electricity to a doorknob and you touch it once and it shocks the shit out of you and you're like, that's never happened before. Touch it again, shocks the shit out of you. Okay, well, one time is random, 2 times, let's just touch it a third time and see if it's a pattern. Okay, third time, shock the shit out of myself. Maybe I don't touch that doorknob anymore. Now, you've decided to make the change, but it's still going to take you every single time you walk by that doorknob, the desire to not touch it, to say, you know what, it shocked me those times. It's probably still going to shock me then. Now, is this the perfect analogy for alcohol and drug use? I don't know. Maybe the battery runs out of juice one day and the doorknob does finally work the old traditional way. But with alcohol and drugs, let's just follow this chain of thought. It's shocked the shit out of us so many times. We already know the end game of that. We already know how that story ends. I don't need to go tempt Cerebus anymore if I've already made it past him a couple times. We're good here. Let's now figure out a way to live life where we don't think that it's a punishment not to be able to drink, that we do enjoy going out to social functions and enjoying people. We do enjoy sitting down and watching a game, even by myself on a Sunday, watching the Red Zone channel, computer in front of me. Maybe I'm doing some schoolwork. And yeah, is it possible to enjoy all these things where alcohol used to be extremely prevalent? It is, but it's really a shifting of my mindset. Because back in the day, drinking booze while watching sports made me feel like I was doing something. I wasn't just watching the game. I was having some drinks and watching the game. Even by myself, I felt like I was being social with the rest of the world, even though no one was in my room, but I knew lots of other people were drinking. So then if somebody called me up later and like, you sound inebriated, I'm like, oh yeah, man, the game was on. I had a few. It was an awesome time. But when the game's done, I want to go back to my normal life. And once I was intoxicated, there was no going back to just being normal Jesse that day. Once that train left the station, I was on the tracks. It was sprint to the blackout, and I'm the only one in the race. That was my way. You might have a different way of perceiving your addiction, and I can by no means come up with all the hypotheticals that could be possible in this short amount of time that we have together. Your decision on whether it is a punishment or whether it is an amazing opportunity is going to shift. It's going to ebb and flow the more you add time under your belt. Because like I mentioned in the post that I made, that first time bowling, skating, walking the beach, going to a social function, having sex. It had been literally years since I had had sex sober without at least something in my system. And to be able to do that, I'll never forget my first sober sex. And while it lacked a lot of the emotional intimacy that I had hoped for it, just being able to step into that and say, I can do this sober was a huge leap for me. In my mind, in my body, in my spirit, all of it came into play. And it's going to take a long time, like I mentioned with the metaphor about the cake. We can mix everything up in the bowl and we can put it in the oven, and it could take 20 minutes to bake. It could take an hour to bake. It depends on temperature and elevation and a lot of varying factors. And making that decision to change, while making that decision happens in an instant, proving to yourself that time and time again, you can be consistent with the decision to make that change. And you can take that consistency and you turn it into discipline, which discipline will always overpower willpower, because willpower is finite and you can run out of it, just like energy and bandwidth. These are things that actually can reach like an apex, and at some point you start to find that your willpower dissipates, and that's where you start to play the mental gymnastics, and you start to say, well, maybe just one. I mean, what's one? Or I never had a problem with weed, so yeah, I have a problem with meth and heroin and crack, but I didn't have a problem with weed, so if I could, I'll just smoke some weed. Recently, St. Augustine sent over a song called Deja Vu by Eminem. And when I launched the YouTube channel, I'm actually going to break down some of my favorite sobriety and addiction recovery and addiction songs. Kendrick Lamar's Swimming Pools will be in there. Tool's Sober will be in there. Hungover by Ella Langley, I think's her name, a new country music star. But definitely Deja Vu by Eminem will be in there. And I'm going to break down these lyrics and just talk us through what they're writing about and how it would absolutely relate to what we're experiencing. And in this song, Deja Vu by Eminem, he talks about how he never had a problem with alcohol, so maybe he'll just drink a little bit, even though he's been sober a fucking year and the devil's still in his ear, right? All that is complaining, but then he drinks, and he drinks a little too much, and wakes up with a pretty severe hangover, and he's like, oh, maybe I could just take a Vicodin to help with the hangover. But Vicodin was his DOC. That was his drug of choice. So the alcohol may have not been his problem in the past, but certainly at some stage, overuse of something that, even though it wasn't your primary drug of choice or beverage of choice, you could find yourself in a state of weakness. Maybe it's through a hangover or through an argument or something of that nature. And now your mind's mental gymnastics of being like, hey, when we felt like this in the past, this is what we utilized to get over the feeling we're currently having. Do you think you want to reintroduce this? And again, once you're asking yourself that question, unless you can really stop yourself on a dime and completely shift focus, you're down that slippery slope. And once that little monster starts chattering in your ear, I'm not going to say it's inevitable, but boy, howdy. You better have some seriously strong pattern interrupts in place, whether it's going to a meeting or calling your sponsor, calling your recovery coach, listening to me in this episode, whatever it might be. You better have some pretty strong ass pattern interrupts, because once your mind starts trying to, for the most part, just convince you that using is an okay idea here, even though you have all this time. And the mind's like, yeah, come on, man. Come on. Yeah, just once. Just the tip. Just the tip. Let's just test it out. Right? This is the issues that we come in with, is once the voice starts going, pattern interrupts are necessary. And if you don't have those tools and strategies in your backpack of sobriety and recovery skills, then you're going to find yourself even more susceptible to those voices. I'm going to get us out of here on this. When we begin to picture what it's like to journey into this amazing world of sobriety and recovery. And again, I think I've talked ad nauseum now about whether it's a punishment or whether it's an opportunity, whether it's a victory. It's really going to be subjective to your perspective, and that perspective is going to change wildly over the course of days, weeks, months, years. There's going to be times where it seems easy, and other times where you're just like, fuck it, man, if today was a drinking day, I'd be drunk. And I was told that by the head of the Salvation Army here in Huntsville. Whenever we were talking one day, and he's like, yeah, I've been sober for years, but there's still those days where I just shake my head and go, man, if today were a drinking day, I'd be drunk. But we're not drinking, and today's not a drinking day. So what are we going to do to figure out all this that just happened? Because we have made the decision to face our problems head on and no longer use any kind of substance to break us down. And here's one of the things I want to explain to y'all before I get out of here, and this will be something I'll continue to touch upon, and I'm pretty sure I've brought this up in the past, but picture yourself walking down a path, and there's choices abound in your life, and you get to one of these choices, and it creates a fork in the road. Now, another way to envision this, if these forks I'm getting ready to create don't necessarily sit well with you, would be picture a house of cards. If you've ever done that, I know this was really a hobby of people back before smartphones were a thing. But back in the day, we would take playing cards and we would stack them in such a way that we would create a base, and then we would create a row on that, and a row on that, and a row on that. So it created a pyramid. Well, these forks in the road actually create a reverse pyramid where the one card is at the top, and then the next layer is 2, the next layer is 4, the next layer is 8, the next layer is 16, and it creates all these different forks in the road. So I've given you a fork in the road metaphor, and I've also given you an upside down house of cards. But either way, what I want us to really be able to visualize here is that we begin to see all these branches breaking off of this one distinct path. Again, throw a tree out there if that so helps you. So now I've given you 3 different metaphors. And so let's reel it in, Jess. Let's focus on the point of this story, is that when you are walking down this path and you come to this fork in the road, your brain is going to have many different decisions. But for the sake of this example, it's got 2 primary decisions: drink or not drink. And from that drink on the left, not drink on the right, multiple forks in the road can be created from that. So I choose to drink. Well, do I choose to drink beer, liquor, or wine? So now we've created 3 more. Great. Now do I choose to drink out in public, alone, and if we or with friends, somebody's house, right? Now we've created more forks in the road. Okay, well, how many am I going to drink? There's more forks in the road. How long am I going to drink? Now there's more forks in the road. And, how late will I stay out? More forks in the road. What's tomorrow morning going to be like? More forks in the road. Who am I going to have to apologize to? Or who am I have to explain myself to? Or who am I going to have to tell that I've just lapsed after having 6 months of sobriety? More forks in the road. More forks in the road. More forks in the road. And here's what ends up happening with the brain as it's trying to create all these different forks in the road and create solutions for each one, to have answers for each one. And mind you, the same thing's happening over here with the sobriety option. There's just a lot more clarity there, because if you continue to choose sobriety, a lot of the things that you already had planned continue on forward, and you don't have to think about how many drinks and how much money and who to do it with and who to apologize to and what the long-term ramifications are. The other side is just your life. But even our quote-unquote normal lives have tens upon thousands of forks in the road that are being created every single day from every single decision that we make. And when your mind attempts to future pace really far away, and this is where the house of cards one works out really well. So you've got the fork in the road, and now you've got drinking on one, and you've got not drinking on the other, and you continue to build this house of cards up. Your mind can only go so many layers forward, trying to come up with solutions for problems that may not even exist, but your mind certainly wants to future pace potential solutions for problems, again, that may not exist, but it wants to do it because it's seeking to justify the behavior. And then when you get too far out on all of these forks, the weight of those forks collapse that house of cards. And again, it's a reverse house of cards. So it's really just balancing right there on you with the first 2 branches, the next layer just being the decision to drink or not drink, to do drugs, to not do drugs, to take the job, to not take the job, to scream at the kids, to not scream at the kids. All of these are choices that create all these branches. And as your mind begins to future pace, trying to create solutions for all of these potentialities forward, it can only handle so many layers until it collapses itself. And what gets crushed under that weight is you. Your self-esteem, your self-confidence, your rational decision-making. This is where you might be stuck with a very important decision, lapse or maintain, and you start to future pace, and then the whole fucking house of cards comes crashing down upon you, and your response is, fuck it, let's just do it. Because the weight of all of that decision-making created such an anxiety and such a stress that once the house of cards collapsed and you were in more of an emotional state because your mind's like, I can't possibly fathom all the decisions I have to make in order for this not to be a problem. Fuck it, let's just drink and see what happens. That's the state of mind we don't want to find ourselves in. That's when we've left rational thought and we have gone completely to emotional thought. And even if you're not emotionally surged and yelling and screaming or feel like you're in a heightened state of fight or flight, you can still be operating on your emotional centered mind, because the rational mind already knows what happens whenever you drink. do drugs, turn to the porn, the sex, the gambling, whatever your addiction is, the food. It already knows the outcome that's coming from that. But you started trying to build up all these rationales for why you could continue doing a behavior that you've already told yourself you're sick and tired of. The weight of all of that collapses down on top of you. And from that emotional centered mind, you make an irrational decision. This is why we don't want to start listening to the voices. This is why we want to cut ourselves off from all of those different forks in the road, all of those different branches from the trunk, because they're not going to lead us to a place that's going to allow us to wake up the next morning feeling good about the decision that we made, if it's turning us back toward our old patterns of behavior. If you start to create all of these amazing forks in the road based off of taking the job, not taking the job, not drinking. And then so you say not drinking. Well, then this is what I could do in the morning, or that. Well, what if I did do, meditated in the morning? Okay, well, then there's also yoga. So meditation, that branch turns into a couple different forks, and the yoga branch turns into a couple different forks. But they're maintaining that healthy lifestyle that you already decided you wanted to follow. So even if the weight of that were to come down and you were like, if I don't know, too many options, I'll just choose meditation. Meditation, coming back down to meditation and yoga over a bottle of gin or a bottle of Jack. I mean, come on, guys. Let's just use a little bit of common sense here. Is the meditation yoga fork in the road going to lead us to a better place than the decisions between gin and Jack? I'm going to go ahead and just assume the answer is yes here. Or we wouldn't be listening to a show about addiction recovery. So even if you're thinking of all the positive things, I do want to leave this caveat here, though, that if it's take a job, leave a job, meditate, yoga, if when the house of cards does collapse because you've tried to create all these branches in the road and you've tried to foresee all the different situations that could come from this decision, when that does, and you'll feel it. I promise you, if you're not utilizing the fork in the road or the tree trunk metaphor or the house of card one, you've got your own version where you've sort of tried to future pace your life out to what would happen if you made this decision. And you get so far out at some point, it just becomes too much for the brain to be able to maintain that many different parallels of life. So whenever it does finally collapse back and you're just sort of like, whoa, that was a lot. It is extremely important that in that moment you make sure that you're not in a heightened emotional state making an irrational decision. This is one of the sayings I came across in my life was, don't make decisions when you're sad and promises when you're happy. If you find yourself just in an influx, and if it could literally mean somebody is standing in front of you needing a decision in the moment, and if you're like, you know what, that was a lot. I need to step away for a few minutes and come back. I mean, if they're like, no, make a decision now, then you have to decide, is making no decision the best decision in that moment? Because being pressured into a decision might lead you down a path that you don't want to experience. That's something that you have to figure out on your own. Again, there's so many millions, infinite hypotheticals I could come up with here. Take the job, don't take the job, Mexican, Italian, Jack, gin. I mean, there's just so many different ways this shows up in your life. You have to make that decision. Is just saying, fuck it, I'll take meditation over yoga. Yeah, there's probably not going to be too many bad implications from choosing meditation or yoga in the moment. I'm going to feel pretty confident that your life's not going to go way off track. Now, if it's do meditation on top of a speeding car down the highway versus doing yoga on a beach at sunrise, okay, then definitely go do that yoga thing. Otherwise, taking in all the different variables that I could hypothesize, it still comes down to you making a decision that will benefit yourself and being mindful that when you seek to future pace all the different variables that can stem from the decision you're making in the moment, you're going to reach a point where the brain it can't hold that much. And when it collapses back down to the present moment, it's in that opportunity you have to breathe in deep, to pattern interrupt yourself and say, okay, let's get out of the emotional state and let's make a very wise-minded decision. When people want to sit here and debate about whether it's a punishment or it's an opportunity, again, that could go on forever and ever and ever. But I have rarely found anyone who has some time under their belt who doesn't say that life is way more manageable without intoxication than it was with intoxication. Yeah, Is it as exciting and fun? I mean, what was exciting and fun to me at 20 is not the same things that are exciting and fun to me nearing 50. I enjoyed what I did in my 20s. I'm glad I had those opportunities. I'm glad I don't ever have to go back to them because I've been there and I've done that. If you haven't been there and done that, then you have to decide if that's something that you want to just leak into your life or not. Because I can tell you, there are tons of people who will say, well, I'll tell you, I'd go back and make that decision differently. And there's lots of other people who are like, yeah, I'll take it or leave it. I didn't really enjoy weed. I didn't really enjoy acid. I didn't really enjoy alcohol. So, it doesn't really affect me. I mean, if it comes around, maybe I'll do it. Maybe I won't. But those people probably aren't listening to this show, although they should, because there's a lot of really cool material about life coaching and just making your life overall more desirable. But certainly I can understand why they may not go into the search field and type in sobriety and recovery like you guys did. Coming down and wrapping this up, I'll say on this note that regardless of whether you're 1 day or 10,000 days in, each and every day it is your choice to decide on whether your life is good or bad, right or wrong, desirable, undesirable, whether sobriety is a punishment from the consequences of, negative, undesirable choices, or whether sobriety is an opportunity to finally spread your wings and fly. Why the phoenix burned up to begin with, to even have to rise out of the ashes. I mean, that's a whole mythical story that we do not have time for. But either way, it rose from the ashes, and it chose to do something differently the next time it was given an opportunity to make choices that were very similar to the ones it no longer is very proud of from the past. You get that opportunity too, each and every single day. It is your choice on whether you wake up saying today's going to be a great day or today's going to be a shitty day, because your confirmation bias is going to push you in whatever direction you choose to lead for yourself. And yeah, there are minor annoyances, stuck at red lights, people cutting us off, getting disconnected from the customer service rep on the cell phone company while we're trying to figure out a billing issue. There are lots of minor inconveniences in life, and there are some pretty major ones too. And none of those should be utilized as excuses or reasons to go back to the bottle, go back to the pipe, go back to the straw, go back to the needle. That's just your mind playing tricks on you, trying to get you to go back to previous behaviors that have already tried to kill you more than once. You have to make a decision to break those patterns of behavior, to pull that needle out of the rut, to change your way of thinking, because it's all happening in your mind. That's where you're creating your reality, and then you're externalizing it and seeking to feel positive by finding ways that the way you think is true all around you. So if it's a punishment and that's how you see it, then that's exactly what you're going to experience it as. If it's an opportunity to move toward fulfillment and potential and love and trust within yourself, then that's how you're going to see it too. But it's a choice. Everything's a choice. The shittiest things have happened to people, and they've still come out of it with that kind of positive mindset. There's some dude who was in a concentration camp back in World War II who said the reason that he and so many survivors made it out of that was that they just found that there was a purpose. That it was their God testing them, or it was an opportunity to prove to themselves their mental, physical, spiritual, emotional resilience. And each and every day they just did not let the Nazis beat them down. They did not let the Nazis take away their humanity or their love for one another. I mean, I'm sure there are other times in human history where we have put each other through some pretty miserable conditions. But as far as in the modern times, that's probably the nearest one that a majority of the world could call attention toward and understand that way of living and what was done to those people. And yet here's somebody who came out of it. I think it may have been the person who ultimately wrote the book that became the movie Schindler's List. I could be wrong about that. I don't have a historical accuracy on that one. But to wrap it up, is that even in those moments, those people made a choice to experience this horror of life in a way where others didn't experience it that way, and they passed and they perished. Don't let yourself pass and perish when a simple choice to experience life a different way could be the answer you've always been waiting for, and it's standing in front of your face the entire time. Looking in the mirror and telling yourself that you love you, that might be difficult at the beginning. So start making little choices to make your life better. Build trust, and with trust comes love. And with love comes that rejuvenation of spirit that you eventually have so much in your cup that you're able to share it with other people. but making sure that you're wearing your oxygen mask first, that your cup is full of. That's going to be the decisions that ultimately lead you towards long-term sobriety and recovery. Punishment, opportunity, it's a choice. It all comes down to choice. And yes, it is like a tree where you plant the seed today and the shade may not fully materialize for 20 years. It is like the cake where you mix all the ingredients up, you put it in the oven, and that aroma gets to fill your life, and you get to start to anticipate what that first bite of that cake will be. But it's still going to take time to achieve there. But you made the choice to eat the cake the moment you started to make the cake. It just might take a little bit longer than you'd prefer, because life isn't full of instant gratification. In fact, most of the things that we call instant gratification take a long time to actually show up. It's just in that moment, it overwhelms us so much, we think it's instant gratification, but it's not. There was hundreds of choices that we had to make in order to even achieve that moment we call instant gratification, but is in reality just the gratification of hundreds of choices coming together for the outcome we desire. And if that outcome you desire is potential and fulfillment and love and trust, make choices that lead you down that path. Because even if the house of cards does collapse, at least it's collapsing on you in a positive way, where the choices are awesome thing 1 or awesome thing 2, not Jack and Jen. As always, my friends, inclusivity over exclusivity, the power of positive energy, release and flow. Every day is the best day of our lives when we wake up sober. It really is an honor to be able to do this for you guys. I just realized that I forgot how I closed the show. Inclusivity over exclusivity, the power of positive energy, release and flow. Every day is the best day of our lives when we wake up sober. Shout out to Sunshine and Robert. Glow on. P.S. If y'all would like to take the NLP class, I am really geared up for this. I already got a couple of y'all signed up. It's going to be rocking and rolling. Starts at the end of September, finishes the first week of December. A couple long days on a Saturday, but then most of it is at night on a Thursday. I'd love to tell you more about it. JesseMogul.com/ask-me. Fill out the NLP page. I am having some issues with my certificate, so if you by chance hear this today and go over there and it seems like it's trying to tell you that it's wonky, that's just Google trying to heist me for a couple $100, and until that whole transaction goes through, my website's going to be a little bit wonky. So it hasn't been corrupted, and it's not a phishing scam. But if you type in JesseMogul.com today on August 16th of 2024, just know that Google's trying to hold my website hostage, so I give them money. Okay, my friends, if you'd like to take NLP, I would love to meet you. As always, you can go over to fromsobrietytorocovery@gmail.com. Special email address just for y'all. If you can't gain access to the website, fromsobrietytorocovery@gmail.com is waiting for you. I'd love to meet you. I'd love to hear about how the show has helped you, and I'd love to discuss with you how NLP could guide you even further, possibly beyond your wildest dreams. My friends, I'll let you go. Take care. See you next time. Bye-bye.